YouTube! Coming at you this evening, I want to talk about a very particular tactic that one can use in basically any kind of ideological debate you can think of. It's one that serves me very, very well, particularly here on YouTube when I'm arguing with the likes of creationists and religious fundamentalists and homophobes and whatnot. And it's a very basic tactic that very many people miss, which is allowing the assumption. What do I mean by that? Well, you will often find here on YouTube that there are people, they tend to be those whose positions are unusual or abstruse, positions that don't really have a sound basis. They tend to attempt to obfuscate issues by throwing as much shit in your face as possible. That is, they will regurgitate positions and arguments that they haven't considered themselves or even formulated themselves, but which they've read on a website, which they've been spoon-fed by a particular apologist or something to that effect, which they haven't considered, they haven't criticised, they just throw it at you in the hopes that it will stick. It's like throwing shit at a wall and hoping that it will stick. And then you as the opponent in this debate have to sit there pairing through the obfuscation every single point until you get to the meat of the matter. And it's a very deliberate tactic to make sure that you don't pair right through to the core of the issue. Now, one way of getting around this, which I found to be particularly effective, is to allow the assumptions, theoretically, not to accept them, not to say, oh, yes, you're absolutely right, but to theoretically say, fine. Within the context of those assumptions, allowing them, does that mean that the point you're trying to make is correct? Does the allowance of these assumptions help your point at all? And in most cases, not only does the allowance not help their point, but the allowance of the assumptions tends to undermine them, because you find that the assumptions in and of themselves don't go any way to feeding whatever point it is they're trying to assert. Really good example, the Kalam cosmological argument. I can't believe that anyone of any genuine critical consideration still utilises this argument. I can't believe that people still pay it attention. I can't believe that apologists still use it, because it is so fucking flimsy. You can allow every assumption that the Kalam cosmological argument tries to make, and its conclusion is still illegitimate. Let's do it. Let's give it a go. Let's have a look at the assumptions of the Kalam cosmological argument. Everything that exists has a beginning, everything that begins has a cause, the universe had a beginning, therefore the universe had to have a cause. There you go. Those are the assumptions of the Kalam cosmological argument in a nutshell. Much refined, much attenuated, but that's basically it. You can allow every single one of them, and it still doesn't bridge the great walking abyss between the final assumption and the conclusion that the people who utilise this argument try to assert, i.e. that the cause must be intelligent, that it must be, not only that it must be intelligent, but it must be a god or a divinity, and that it must be their god or divinity. There is a walking great abyss between these assumptions and the conclusions that they're trying to assert, which no apologist I have ever come across tries to bridge. They rely instead upon maintaining the assumptions. And as I've just shown you, you can allow the assumptions, you can allow every single one of the assumptions in this argument, and yet they go no way to reinforcing or even suggesting the conclusions that they like to assert. Why does it have to be a god? Why does it have to be intelligent? Why does it have to be your god? What process of logic and observation demonstrates A, that it's a god, B, that it's your god, C, what process of logic and evidential reasoning do you use to determine what a god is? What parameters does a god operate in? How do you slice off or observe the processes that the God undergoes to create this universe. You can't. It is ultimately, the Kalam cosmological argument ultimately is an exercise in flinging shit in your opponent's face. That's what it is. So that they can't pair through to the core of the issue. And no one, quite frankly, rather than attempting to unpick its assumptions, we should just not pay it any attention at all. We should just pair right through to the final conclusion, which is the assertion that the universe was created by a particular creator entity, a particular God. That's what we should be focusing on. The assumptions and the syllogistic process that comes before is nonsense. You can accept it and then you can just throw it away. You can acknowledge it theoretically and then just throw it away, because the assumptions in no way feed into the final conclusion. Another fucking excellent example are almost every argument you'll hear from homophobes, or from racists for that matter, from racial supremacists, from nationalists. Every single argument you will hear against, for example, gay marriage, or just marriage for same-sex couples. I hate that, as an aside, I hate that fucking notion. Gay marriage. There's no such thing as gay marriage. There is just marriage between two individuals who happen to be of the same sex. You know, I don't go for a gay walk down the gay path to get my gay fish and chips of a Friday afternoon, do I? I don't go to my gay job or whatever. I'm just a homosexual man who happens to engage in these activities. Let's have a look at some of the arguments that homophobes like to bring up as a way of demonstrating this principle. Now, one of the things you will hear from homophobes is that the practice of homosexuality, the free practice of homosexuality, is somehow harmful to the individual. That there are studies that demonstrate that homosexuals live shorter lifespans than heterosexuals. It's bullshit, obviously. The one study that was ever done that proclaimed to demonstrate this has been monstrously criticised by the genuine rational community, and it has just been thrown out completely. It's been demonstrated to be utterly false. But let's allow the assumption that the free practice of homosexuality seriously limits a person's lifespan. So what? You can allow that assumption. And it doesn't make any odds. It doesn't make any difference. There are any number of lifestyle choices, of just everyday decisions that that many human beings make, that impact negatively upon their health, that are not legislated against, or that in no way inhibit their rights as a citizen or as a human being. Good example: eating at McDonald's. Eating fast food every day is seriously damaging to your lifestyle, to your existence, to your health and to your life. Why, on that basis, why aren't these people attempting to legislate against fast food? Why aren't they attempting to legislate against smoking, against alcohol consumption, against driving cars, and simply against unhealthy living? The reason is that the argument that the homosexual lifespan is somehow shorter if one is actively homosexual is bullshit. It's an attempt to fling shit in your eyes, along with any number of others. They don't really care about that. It's just any basis that they can contrive or conceive to obfuscate the issue, because they know, somewhere deep down, they know that they haven't got a fucking leg to stand on. They know that it's just a case of, I hate fags. They are no different from Fred Phelps and the Westboro Baptists. And it's, as I've said many, many times, I would prefer to sit down and have a talk with Fred Phelps than I would with William Lane Craig, with Peter Sprigg, than any member of the Family Research Council or anyone of that ilk, because they are more insidious. They're much more damaging than the likes of the Westboro Baptists. They don't believe any different. The Westboro Baptists are just honest about it. That's the only difference. I mean, they are just honest about their bigotry. That's all. They use the appropriate language and the appropriate tone. If you look at what Peter Sprigg and William Lane Craig and representatives of the Family Research Council actually say, if you pair through the politicking bullshit and get right down to the implications of what they're claiming, the implications are no different from what Fred Phelps and the Westboro Baptists claim. The only difference is the language. And I prefer that they use the appropriate language, quite frankly. Another really good example is the whole choice argument, this notion that the decision to engage in homosexuality is a conscious choice. How you can argue that when it's based upon attraction, physical and romantic attraction, I don't know. You don't choose who you are physically or romantically attracted to any more than you choose what you think or what you believe. It's an absurd notion, but let's allow it. Let's allow the assumption. Let's assume that there is absolutely no genetic component, there is no biological predisposition for homosexuality at all, that it is a complete and utter choice. So what? Does that acknowledgement in any way legitimise the prejudicial behaviour of homophobes, or their attempts to legislate against it? No, it does not, because we do not legislate against human beings. We do not even determine how we perceive or judge human beings based upon decisions they make that have absolutely no impact upon anybody else's life but their own. And no homophobe, no homophobic group has ever demonstrated that the free practice of homosexuality has any impact, or the existence of marriage between same-sex couples has any effect upon anyone save those involved in the relationships. In rational terms, if that were the case, then there should be legislation against people who choose to drive cars instead of riding bicycles or walking, because statistically you are far more likely to cause harm to yourself or to someone else, serious injury, simply by getting into your car and driving to work than you are engaging in homosexuality, in homosexual behaviour every second of every day. You could be having rampant sex with members of the same sex every single second of every single day, and you still wouldn't statistically be causing or be likely to cause harm than if you chose to drive to work every morning, to and from work every day. So yeah, this is one of my favourite tactics. It's one of my favourite tactics to allow the assumptions, because allowing the assumptions theoretically takes away their defences. It rips them out of their hands, and they're kind of like, oh, okay, well, we don't have anything other than the core of the issue then. And the core of the issue is then exposed as the ugly, petulant and ill-considered thing that it is. And then after you've ripped through the core of the issue, then you can start dismantling the assumptions, which by that point it will be incidental anyway. So yeah, there you go. Try it out. Try it out next time you come across someone like that on YouTube or in life. It's enormous fun. It is absolutely enormous fun. Simply because it's unexpected, by and large. They expect you to get frustrated and to try to pick apart every assumption they try to fling in your face. When you allow them, when you theoretically accept them, they've got nowhere to hide. It takes the fig leaves away, basically, and exposes them for what they are.